Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
And I'm coming to you from my friend's lake house right off of Clarks Hill Lake in Plum Branch, South Carolina. Hey, I think this is the first time The Ron Show has done a show in another state, so kudos to that. Anyway, I want to thank Angie and Bob for letting me come down here and stay for a few days. It's been a busy 2024. The election cycle doesn't help, but yours truly being a real estate agent, things have been kind of antsy-pantsy back in Atlanta, and I had a few days to just kind of chill, and so here I am. Also joining me by phone, although I think she'd like to be here too, honestly, if she's being honest. Marilyn Marks from the Coalition for Good Governance. How are you this morning?
I'm great, and you bet I would love to be there.
It really is so
Next
pretty.
time I'll demand an in-studio appearance.
Yeah, well, the studio is a screened-in porch, but still, there's even room for an audience if we ever decided to do that. But nonetheless, thank you for joining me. We're coming together because here we are. We've got Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, the vice president of the United States, touring South Georgia today and tomorrow before culminating in a big rally in Savannah. They realize that Georgia is in play again, and polls show that since Joe Biden stepped aside and Vice President Kamala Harris took the mantle and then became the nominee, that polls in Georgia show it's a state in play, that it's, again, a swing state. We still have folks here in the state of Georgia, over there in the state of Georgia, talking about 2020. And maybe that's not so much an issue anymore, or maybe it was. Don't really know. I said last time we had Marilyn on this show, listen, if they want to go look at Fulton County numbers again, why should anybody get in the way? Get it right this time, because Georgia's electoral votes turned out not to matter in the overall results of the 2020 presidential election. Just get it right. And there seems to be some ambivalence, if not some outright pushback to doing that. So Marilyn texted me yesterday and says, "Hey, I've been listening back to some of your episodes talking about the state elections board," and I'm paraphrasing you, Marilyn, so I apologize. She's like, not unlike the rest of the media, you're kind of getting this all wrong, and I don't take that from just.
Oh, it's nicer than that.
Yeah, I don't take that from just anybody, but she says it in such a nice way. It's like, no, you're right. So I wanted to give you the opportunity today to help me kind of point this boat. I'm on the lake. Point this boat in the right direction so that we're not heading into trade winds here. How do first of all, this is such a complicated story. I almost feel like I need to have one of those police department bulletin boards with string and tape and all that stuff because it's so confusing.
And you need to have your own personal lawyer then to explain it all to you.
Right. Now you're actually here to sort of defend whom I've labeled the MAGA three, the three most recently appointed Republican conservative state election board members, because you believe that they're actually trying to get this right.
It's hard for me to address anyone's motives, and I think we have to admit that Trump may have some very, impure motives in terms of what he would like to see happen in the event that he loses in Georgia.
I mean, the man just used Arlington. He just used Arlington ceremony as a photo op, so his motives are clear.
His motives are really, very questionable.
Right.
But I want us, and we need to be very worried about the quality and the verifiability of the election, to make it as tight as possible so that he has as little room as possible to maneuver. Okay,
there you
that
go.
said,
I like that.
That said, I think that we shouldn't be, obsessed with trying to figure out the motives of the people who were asking for these rules to be made. And we really shouldn't be trying to sort out what the motives are of the three people who voted for them. But instead, let's figure out whether these rules are good or bad and what needs to happen to them so that they help, not hurt. And I think that people are not understanding just how much Georgia elections are completely messed up.
Oh yeah,
And
no, and that's the thing. Like, as you're texting me all this stuff yesterday, and I'm reading over it last night, and again this morning, I'm like, man, what a freaking mess this whole system is. And let me address this first of all. Monday there was a lawsuit that's been supported by Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris in her campaign that the Democratic Party has filed that seeks to undo some of these rules because they believe that they're in violation of state law. And there's even, the insinuation of the board meetings that, were held illegally, this, that, and the other. So this is now actually going to court. We've even seen where Governor Brian Kemp has quietly asked Attorney General Chris Carr for guidance on whether or not he has the ability to remove board members if he deems it necessary. So there's a lot on the line here, and this isn't just a strictly Democrat v. Republican scenario. This is a Democrat and some, I guess, never Trumper Republicans, it sounds like, trying to cast some doubt on the validity of some of these new policies that have been put into place.
And when you don't understand, when people, particularly in the out-of-state organizations, don't understand what a mess Georgia elections are, I can see why they are saying, we need to make sure that there is no running room for people who want to overturn the election. But where that gets really confusing is there are a lot of problems in Georgia's elections that do need to get corrected before certifications.
Okay.
And, Ron, I thought maybe one way to explain to your listeners just what I'm talking about is to tell you about what happened in May in Coffee County.
Okay, this past spring.
There was a recount.
Okay.
This past spring in the May 2024 primary.
Okay.
There were some problems. Now let's think about Coffee County. It's kind of your average size county in Georgia. Maybe they got 40,000 population. They have about 15,000 that voted in the last presidential election. So it's a small community. And there were 3 really, really close races that mattered to that community. There was a primary that was super close for the sheriff's race, a tax commissioner primary, and a state court judge race.
All right.
Those are the types of offices that really affect people's lives in a small community, right? Your sheriff, your tax commissioner, and your state judge court. I mean, the small court there, state court judge. All right. People care about this. The margins were really tight. We just happened to look after the election and noticed that in their reporting of their results, there were 3 precincts that were showing 0 results. And
meaning nobody showed up?
That's what it showed. That
right.
Nobody showed up, no votes were cast. And I started calling people who I knew had voted in those precincts. And they said, no, we voted.
Wow.
And so we started trying to get to the bottom of it. We called a local reporter down there. We called the election supervisor and said, what's going on here? They were saying, no, it's all been reported. It's all perfect. It's all good. And we're going to meet. The election board's going to meet to certify it.
So
wait, y'all kids. Yeah, go ahead.
They should have a piece of paper with the tally then, right? I mean, I know you're looking at the Secretary of State's website, so surely just the website just didn't have the data right, but they actually had it on paper, right?
They did, but they did not know to reconcile them.
Oh.
They did. It turned out. Now we're talking about, how this reasonable inquiry thing keeps coming up in terms of that the people who are opposing the state board rule are saying you shouldn't be doing reasonable inquiry.
Well, this sounds like a reasonable inquiry.
Yeah, yes, it does, doesn't it? And so we started pushing back on that, and said, look, y'all need to do some inquiry, and you can't just have these races reporting 0. So we persuaded the board to take another action that would be a reasonable inquiry, an investigation, if you will. We persuaded them to have a discretionary recount. That is something that is in Georgia law. The local board can do a discretionary recount prior to the certification. Ron, prior to the certification.
I was just going to say, is this all being done before deadline?
Yep.
Okay.
It's all being done before the deadline.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Because we were fortunate enough, we just caught it fast. We caught these numbers going up, shortly after. Well, we had been told by local voters we're really going to be looking at these races, and in fact, one of our members was running in a school board race down there.
Okay.
So she really wanted us to be watching the numbers.
All right.
And
fair enough.
we were kind of watching in real time, and they didn't make any sense. They were going to meet to certify these, and we inserted ourselves and said, hey, look, we have members in Coffee County. We need to get better data. They finally realized, maybe we shouldn't be certifying these numbers. They finally agreed, and they agreed to do a discretionary recount before finalizing the numbers.
All right.
And we went down there. It's supposed to be a public process. It turned out, as much hostility as we've had with that board, they welcomed us, actually. Huh. They actually welcomed us because we went in with the attitude of, look, we want to help you. We want to get it right. So one of the things we begged them to do before they started the recount of scanning all the ballots, Ron, we said, look, can you go back to your warehouse, go to all your scanners? They didn't have that many. They only had 6 precincts, right. So they didn't have lots of them. We said, go to all your scanners and clean out all the drawers, clean out the write-in bin, clean out the emergency drawer, and clean out the bottom of the scanner, and make sure you got all of the ballots. They said, we get all the ballots. We get them all on election night. We clean them all out. We always account for all the ballots. So we'll just humor us.
Yeah,
humor us here.
Uh-huh.
And they did. They come back with, I don't remember the number, 40, 50, 60 ballots.
Get out of here.
No, they had found them in the bottom of the scanner, in the write-in drawer, and the emergency drawer. They had found them in all the places we told them to look. And sure enough, now let's think about that, Ron. Remember how the press has just been having a fit over how ballots should not be, quote, counted at the precincts before they come into headquarters? There was a rule that was made that said account for all the ballots before you bring them into headquarters at the end of the polling night.
Well, and the person with chain of custody, the person with chain of custody would want that too. Like, cover my ass. Like, tell me that this is the number that when I leave the building and show up at the county HQ, and that's the same number that I arrive with. I want to,
Yeah, we don't. Well, you don't want to be blamed for missing 50 ballots.
Hell no, because I'm too pretty for prison.
That's right. And so, this is why someone proposed that rule. Okay. Let's account for all the ballots before we leave for the night, and let's make sure they end up at headquarters. Okay, they are not saying, this is where the press got it wrong, Ron. Mm-hmm. A lot of the press was saying, you want to do all the vote tabulations at the precinct. You want to hand count all the votes. No, it's just accounting for all the sheets of paper, making sure they are all out of the bottom of the scanner. Yeah. Making sure they're all out of the side bins and stuff.
And so let me ask you this. We're with Marilyn Marks, Executive Director for the Coalition for Good Governance. Does this mean that at the precinct level, if you have a certain number of people who signed in, you need to have a certain number of ballots that leave the building? And is that the first fail safe? And if, as you said, there may be, a dozen or so, drawers or bins where there might be some ballots somehow stuck or sitting in scanners or whatnot, that's the first warning sign. Hey, listen, we had 317 people show up at this precinct and they only have 282, ballots to tabulate.
That is yet another point, and that is exactly right. That's the first thing you're supposed to do, and a lot of county precincts fail to do it. Okay. And that is look at your poll book, see how many people you had show up to vote. Yeah. If you had 100 people sign in, you darn well better have 100 ballots, either in the scanner or provisional ballots. Right? Okay. Don't be showing up with 50 ballots or worse, 150 ballots. Well, I don't know which is worse, but so that is one of the things that not all Georgia counties were doing, and that is reconciling the number of voters that came in the door with the number of ballots you've got, and that should be done
Well, now that all just seems way too logical. Anyway, we're going to put a pin in that. That's a good breaking point. We'll come back and speak with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, exposing Georgia's messed up election system from the county level on up. When the Ron Show returns here on America One Radio or Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL. Facebook is the good one because I always post a podcast, the blog, the show notes, all there. That's where you get all the citations you hear us discuss on the show. We're with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, and we were talking about election integrity here in the state of Georgia, and it can't be more important than making sure that the number of people that show up to vote and sign in to vote and that number at the door meets the same number of ballots leaving the door at the end of election night. And so that's kind of where we agree. That's kind of a basic thing. So I'm going to let her pick up where we left off on that topic.
Let's say you're supposed to have 100 ballots. The idea is make sure that it really is 100, not just what the tape says, but you've really got 100 before you send the guy down to the headquarters.
Okay.
Well, it turns out that Coffee County had not cleaned out all the ballots, nor had they reconciled the number.
Mm-hmm.
So they did not realize, because they didn't try to do any of these reconciliations, inquiries, that they didn't realize that they were out of balance. They didn't realize their numbers were wrong and kept pounding the table that their numbers were right when they were not right.
But I mean, they were not counting whole precincts. This wasn't just a few ballots in a few drawers. These were 3 whole precincts.
Well, that's what we all thought until they rescanned them and got roughly the same totals. When they had to add the other ballots that were in the bottom of the, that were in the drawers and everything.
Right.
We got roughly the same totals. Wait a minute. How did we get the same totals? Roughly the same totals.
Right.
If these precincts were showing 0. Well, they had misclassified. They had coded the memory card wrong.
Okay.
And so they had counted ballots, but they put them in the wrong category.
See, this is the thing that gets me. And this is why I'm like, go ahead and recount Fulton County if you want to. Like, find the errors in the process. You may not even find that there are errors in the tabulation so much that's going to change the outcome, but at least you figure out where the flaws are so that when something glaring like that pops up on the Secretary of State's website, it doesn't look like the fix is in and it quietens the doubters.
Right. Now, so during this recount that they agreed to because we put the pressure on,
sure, and
they didn't have to agree to it.
Mm-hmm.
So during that day that they spent all day counting, it was Memorial Day that they agreed to do it. The sheriff's candidate was sitting there. The tax commissioner's family was there. The state court judge had somebody there, and as they should have. And they were nervously, they didn't know what was happening in terms of why these precincts had shown 0.
Yeah.
And they were seeing all these errors get resolved ballot by ballot. And, we're sitting there with tallies about, okay, this one was for me, that one was for you.
Yeah.
You can kind of imagine the small county process going on. And this is why we do need inquiry, investigation, etc. At when we have votes that were misreported. Well, then before all the final tallying got done, the server and the scanner start breaking down.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there were all sorts of problems with the machine, which had to be investigated and rectified on the spot. We got most of the work done to the point that everybody was satisfied that at least we'd accounted for all the ballots and the tallies were correct.
Okay.
But they never got around to doing the step you said, even though we demanded it, but we left because they were doing it the next day. And the next day, they never got around to figuring out if they had gotten a ballot for all the voters who showed up.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a long story to say this is real life stuff with candidates in elections that really matter to the local people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If these little errors had happened in the Harris-Trump election, chances are it wouldn't have made any difference.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, close elections happen, and they matter, and we can't just overlook errors and just say certify. Your job's to do nothing but certify. Don't do any inquiry. They need to do inquiry as part of the canvassing. And then when you hear people say that certification is a ministerial duty? It is. And no, there should be no discretion on that. You're supposed to be getting the canvass right to begin with. Canvass is accounting for all the ballots, tabulating them, making sure that the tallies add up. None of those things had Coffee County done. And Coffee County's not an outlier. There are a lot of small counties that operate kind of seat of your pants. My point here is that people may have been overreacting based on what they viewed as motivations of either the petitioners or the state election board members without thinking through, yes, we do need some of these controls. It needs to be clear. And really what was needed was clarity around the terms like, reasonable investigation and making sure that it was to be done in the canvassing process.
All right. Let's put a pin in it. I've got to take a quick break. We'll come on back. We're going to talk with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance Executive Director. She is blowing the lid off of the state election board kerfuffle and kind of putting us in a bit more of a proper perspective, I should say. When the Ron Show returns here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So we're on with Marilyn Marks, Executive Director, Coalition for Good Governance. I was actually kind of giving her a hard time last night and this morning. I'm like, she is like the worst professor ever. Here's your homework, and then when you wake up in the morning, here's some more homework. But this is actually so very thorough, and I'm glad you're doing it. I'm also glad that, by the way, you take the time to explain it to me like I'm stupid, because I'm kind of stupid about this stuff. But no, I mean, this is the Coffee County case, I think, was just a fantastic little case study that kind of spells out exactly how we can explain this to folks in a symptomatic, form, so that they go, just like I did last segment, oh, I get it. But also, the Coffee County scenario is so unique because that is the county where the breach happened in 2020 or 2021. And it's a small county, so we've got a small sample size. But also, the board makeup in Coffee County, you were pointing out off the air, is
3 MAGAs and 2 others. And let's think about this. Everybody's worried about the MAGA controlled boards. Mm-hmm. Well, we had to push them to agree to conduct these inquiries, to find out where these votes went wrong. If we had not been there pushing, chances are no one would have known how to push them, what the laws were, how to get it done. Do we really want MAGA controlled boards just certifying anything that comes out of the machines and
no.
not reconciling things?
No.
Isn't if we listen to some of the progressive voices right now, they are saying just certify, take the number and certify, no reasonable inquiry. Well, wait a minute. The worst thing that can happen, more than even delaying the certification, which is what many of the progressive voices are worried about. I'm not worried about delaying the certification. The law hasn't changed. The rules say you got to do it by 5 o'clock on the Monday after the election.
That's a good point.
Okay. So the progressive voices are saying, no, you can only just certify whatever's put in front of you. Well, really, do we really want MAGA-run counties generating any damn number they want to and signing off on it?
Which I think is an important point to point out. On the day that Vice President Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are on a bus tour in Southeast Georgia, hitting some MAGA-run counties, for crying out loud. It's not about winning the counties. It's about losing by a smaller margin. So, yeah, let's get this right. Let's get this right at the state level. I have to ask you a question, though. This sounds a lot like there's just not a well-written process in place for doing this at the precinct and the county and then at the state level. And I know we give Brad Raffensperger a hard time over this, and certainly he has done, if not nothing, less than nothing, to make this a more smooth process while he's been Secretary of State. But we were talking off the air. I want to know how much of this goes beyond Brad Raffensperger, because let's remember, before he was Secretary of State, a fellow by the name of Brian Kemp was Secretary of State and oversaw his own election when he was running for governor in 2018. And Stacey Abrams, Republicans famously point out, she's not conceded that race still. She's admitted that she did not win it, but she's not saying that it was a fair election. Stacey Abrams has had questions about, the way that all was tabulated and run and whatnot. And which begs me to ask, this good old boy thing at the precinct level and the county level, this didn't just pop up overnight. This is not just a new thing. This is something that has been long a problem in the state of Georgia, I'm guessing. And I'm guessing you would probably agree. This didn't just become a mess overnight.
It has been a developing mess and getting worse by the day, particularly as we know that, the system is not secure. It is very complex. The system was really bad at the Stacey Abrams Kemp race. It could not be audited. If you recall, and this have to be a story for another day, there were 127,000 missing votes in the lieutenant governor's race, and it turned out to be concentrated all over the state in black precincts.
Wow.
There was an anomalous missing of votes in black precincts. That's a whole story we should talk about sometime, because with this type of electronic voting where there is not a trustworthy paper trail, we can never tell what happened.
Yeah.
So the point is that Kemp, before Raffensperger, and then Raffensperger's only made it worse, have selected electronic systems that cannot ever be verified in terms of the results, and we will never really know who won. Now, Raffensperger has made it worse by two things: allowing the election software to be stolen by Trump's allies, and then doing nothing about it.
Yeah. Has
left it out there for 3 years, doing nothing about it, knowing that the guy who is on the ballot, his allies have the software. So no, it has gotten worse rather than better. There's no accountability. And going back to your basic point, Secretary Raffensperger has not issued any guidelines to the counties as he should have, saying, oh, by the way, on election night, be sure you reconcile the number of ballots to the poll book, and then make sure you've accounted for all of those ballots before you send them down to the headquarters.
Yeah.
He hasn't written those things, and the state election board hasn't done so either. Therefore, the counties kind of just do whatever they want to. They never look back at the very complex statutes on the books to try to figure out what they are to do.
But that's also talk about some dereliction of duty on the Secretary of State part. There's a lot of noise, and the media's tried to cover this, and the lawsuit sort of speaks to it as well. Illegal meetings and vague policy. A lot of this stems from the fact that the Secretary of State, while not a voting member on the board, is still supposed to be a member of the board, and hasn't been at a board meeting in how long?
Over 3 years. He was made an ex officio member of the board by the General Assembly, meaning he has statutory duties, Ron, to attend those meetings, to give his input from the standpoint of the Secretary of State. And instead of being there and trying to help them get it right and help issue the rules that are needed and help get the right wording on those rules, instead, he doesn't show up for the meetings, gives no input, and then stands back and throws stones at the state election board. And the press has been treating him like he's a hero rather than the guy who is not carrying out his lawful duties.
How has he not been recalled by now? I mean, that's...
Yeah, really.
You don't do your job. You should be recalled from office.
So, think about what a good Secretary of State would be doing. When this rule came up for review, and it goes through several stages of review, before the rule's adopted, it just doesn't get adopted overnight. It takes quite a long time. When a good Secretary of State, when the board would have received the rule, would say, you know what, the intention here looks good, but they've got the wording wrong, they've got the process wrong.
Right, yeah, get it.
Sit down with the petitioner and get this wording right, because there is a void that needs to be filled. And our people can help get the wording right. But that's all missing. Instead, they let the thing go through as it was without amending any of the wording. The Attorney General is not blameless here either. He
Mhm.
has an attorney assigned to the state election board.
Right.
Did they do one thing to help get this wording straightened out? No, they didn't. And they had every opportunity. We saw this coming a little bit, and we asked the petitioners, look, we think if you change the wording, make it a little more clear, you won't get such pushback and
Mm.
confusion.
Mm.
But they didn't know the process to do that. We're afraid to try to hold things up. But that should have been the Attorney General and the Secretary of State's job to help get it right. And we would have avoided this controversy that how many thousands of man hours has this taken from even the reporting of it, Ron,
Mm-hmm.
that is unnecessary when there are many more things that should have been done.
I mean,
But
Marilyn,
no,
we're cutting.
and
We're literally cutting into my vacation time because of this. I'm sorry.
sorry about that.
No, not at all. Not at all. I was going to do a show anyway. No, but I mean, you're right. That there's just so much that's gone into this. Hey, here's something that I wanted to ask you about, because I think the new little wrinkle in all this, there's been a little mending of fences between the Donald Trump camp and the Governor Brian Kemp camp. And yet at the same time, we heard, was it late last week, that the governor reached out to the Attorney General, Chris Carr, to find out if the governor has the power to remove state election board members if he or whoever would be in office deems it necessary. Which to me says, listen, you remove one of those MAGA 3 and any mending of fences, any honeymoon between Kemp and Trump is over. But I'm curious to see, like, on what grounds Kemp might be removing somebody from the election board. I mean, is it the guy who basically said, yeah, I'm open for a Trump 2024 cabinet position if you decide you want one, from here. I don't know what it is. I don't know what his motivation is, but that's sort of a curious little twist in all of this.
Well, what the Democrats have been asking him to do is to remove them for the so-called illegal meeting that they had.
Yeah.
But we were right in the middle of that, Ron, because we had a petition that was straddling those meetings that didn't get heard on the 9th.
So glad I led you to that, because I know you wanted to discuss the illegal meeting part.
Okay, so we were hearing from the board members saying, "Gosh, we didn't get your petition heard. Can you show up on such and such time? We're trying to schedule this meeting. We're trying to notify people, and we have been told." And in fact, there is a memo that could be read to mean this exact thing. They said, "We've been told if we don't have this meeting to conclude and formally adjourn, what's going to happen is all this work we did on Tuesday the 9th is going to be unwound. We think we have to have a meeting." From everything that we could tell, being on the recipient end of those conversations, because we were to present our petition,
That's right.
they were making good faith efforts to do what it seemed they were being told they needed to do. Now, was it clumsy? Yes. Was the communication bad? Yes, the communication was bad. There was so much strife going on that it is really hard to say that those people were trying to have an illegal meeting, particularly because it was merely to convene the meeting that had been taking place on Tuesday, where they ran out of time because the chairman really did not manage the agenda well.
Mm.
However, some of the people who were throwing rocks need to remember they live in glass houses, because where there was actually an illegal meeting, Ron, and nobody's reporting this. On the day of the 9th, where the first meeting, was taking place, the totally legal meeting, early in the process, Jan Johnston raises the issue, said, I want to talk about how we are going to handle this 2020 complaint about all the double counting and missing votes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The chairman and Ms. Gazal said, then we're going to go into executive session. There are really strict rules on a public body going on executive session. And
Right.
Dr. Johnston said, wait a minute, we don't have any legal basis for going into executive session. She was right. They overruled her. They left the room. They all went into executive session. We followed up and learned the details. And in fact, we submit that, in fact, that absolutely was an illegal meeting that should have not been held in private. And you don't need all the board details right now for your audience, but we submit that is not gray. They should not have had that meeting. Then we heard, and this is a total rumor, Ron, so I have to say the rumor, but we've heard this from some at least secondhand witnesses that afternoon at the end of the day that the board went over to their offices and had another little rump session.
Oh, you
together.
can't do that.
You can't do that. So that may not be true, but the places we heard it seemed like that would have been credible. Anyway, so let's just make sure that what's good for the goose is good for the gander here. If we're going to start accusing people of illegal meetings, let's take them all in.
We're with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance. This sounds like a fantastic opportunity to take one more quick break, and then I want to conclude with, so what of the new policies that they have enacted are sound and should work, even in a limited time frame to implement them, and then maybe some decisions that they've made. I think the paper ballot thing is a huge miss on their part, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. But we're going to take a quick break and come back and discuss all that is right and all that is wrong with Georgia's election counting process when the Ron Show returns here on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or wherever you podcast. Final few minutes, I'm joined with Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, who is giving us the flyover view of everything that is right and wrong with the Georgia election tabulation process, and even, in some respects, defending the MAGA 3, which I'm going to let her do. But listen, some of these new policies that they're putting in place, we can agree that, okay, maybe they're good ideas, but are they good ideas so close to the 2024 election, or is this just more a sign of a dereliction of duty by past state election boards and the Secretary of State not to put these policies in place long ago?
So, Ron, you know the old saying, it's never too late to do the right thing.
Okay.
And the changes that they have been asked to make, none of them are anything that they need lots of planning for, or buy new equipment or hire new staff. I mean, the ones we were just talking about Coffee County, do you really want to say, oh, it's a change, so now you don't have to really get it right.
All right.
You don't really have to go make sure all the ballots are counted.
Sure.
So you were asking about what are some of the rules that they've put in that, good and bad. All right. One of the ones that was controversial is to make it clear in the law or the rules that observers can be at the various stations when the ballots are being tabulated through the scanners, checked in from the runners that came in from the polling places.
Right.
All the various processes that happen. Can you have observers there? Of course you need observers there.
But can we keep that at a minimum number so it's not a mob?
Well, the last thing you need to worry about is a mob, because it's hard to get people to do it.
That's true.
It's really hard to even get volunteers to do this. But there are always rules that give the superintendent control over the offices, so that they can say, no, we don't have room for everybody. All we can do to keep disturbances, keep down disturbance is, have 10 people here. I promise you, though, what we wish the problem was having lots of observers that want too many observers. Okay. All right. That was one that really needs to be done. And let's think about Coffee County. If we had more observers there, things like the ballots wouldn't have been left in the bottom of the scanners. Okay. People would have been noticing that 0 votes were getting reported.
Yeah.
People would have seen. Okay. So you get the idea.
All right.
It has been so, we talked about this a little bit, the idea of counting the ballots before counting the number of pages before you leave.
Sure.
That's gotten so much pushback from the Democrats. I must have 100 emails from various Democratic organizations saying, oh my God, they want us to count all the votes before they're left, hand count the votes. That's just not even what the rule is. The rule just is saying account for all the ballots. That is a good one, just as we talked about in Coffee County.
Yeah.
Of course, I was very disappointed yet again that they said no to setting aside the touchscreens and using hand-marked paper ballots as the secure substitute. That's what we ought to be doing this election. After all, we know that the Trump team has stolen the software, and they can easily make use of it to completely subvert this election, and no one's doing anything about that, Ron.
Right. Yeah, and I don't understand. Like now that you've given me about 35 minutes of a lecture here to understand why the lawsuit filed is sort of a misguided lawsuit. I'm more curious why that hasn't gotten more scrutiny from left-leaning and progressive and activists and organizations and the Democratic Party.
Well, we are actively told all the time to just shush about it because they are so fearful. It is just so scary. They just can't talk about it, and they don't want voters to know that there is this very big risk out there, and because they're afraid that voters won't show up at the polls. I don't think that's true at all. I think voters will show up in big numbers. And, if they would talk about it and push back, then we might get the problem solved. But instead, silence is enhancing and increasing the risk. And I don't want to say, by the way, that is a completely misguided lawsuit. The good thing that can come out of it is if the court will define the difference between the ministerial job of certifying the good canvas and making sure that the Board of Elections is doing a good canvas and they have all of the documents necessary. By the way, another debate that they are having is they keep saying, well, the Board of Elections shouldn't be able to see every document. Oh, they shouldn't be given all of this before they certify. Wait a minute. They are the official custodians of those records. Yeah. How do you tell the official custodian, oh, no, you can't look at your own records? That is really misguided. But I think that being the optimist here, that there may be some good things come out of that lawsuit if we can get things better defined about where these reasonable inquiries and investigations must take place to get an accurate canvas and then a required certification.
So I have about 2 more minutes. Here's a question for you. Is the American public and is Donald Trump capable of letting the process play out? It seems like election night, Tuesday night, and certification on the following Monday, that is, by my math, about 6 days for results. Do we have the discipline? Does Donald Trump have the discipline of waiting for results like that if it takes that long?
Well, of course, it's a little more complicated than that because that certification is only the county level certification. The certification of his election and all the federal and state elections, that the next step is on the third Friday after the election is when that gets certified by Secretary Raffensperger. Does he have the discipline? If he loses, I'm not counting on any discipline at all.
Yeah, that's the powder keg. I mean, we saw what happened on January 6, 2021, and the months leading up to that, and how he took his eye off the ball of the job that he still had. I mean, I was talking about this the other day, the Afghanistan exit. It's like, that guy had 2.5 months to focus on that alone and took his eye off the ball because he was more focused on trying to overturn an election that he had lost. But, that's another topic for another day.
But I think what you've argued for there is more transparency around the system.
Well, heaven forbid.
Because if we've got more transparency, then it narrows his pathway to be able to try to overturn the election.
And listen, I've got 60 seconds. I'm going to wrap with this. I feel like we've got both sides looking at each other going, well, show me how you do it. Because they're both not doing it right. At the blue big county level, at the small MAGA red county level, neither side's doing it right. And they both kind of want to hold on to the way things are, but it's not helping we the people in the middle. So I want to thank you for clarifying and explaining this out in a way that if I can get it, then I know my smarter audience can get it. And I want to thank you so much, Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, for bringing the spotlight into this cave and shining a light on all the stuff that we might be tripping over.
Thank you, Ron. Have a great time at the lake.
All right, will do. Thank you so much. Marilyn Marks, Coalition for Good Governance, for joining the Ron Show today. I appreciate you. That is going to do it for the Ron Show. I'm at Clarksville Lake. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my day. A few more days here as well. We replay the show on America One Radio 5 to 6 p.m. and then 7 to 8 p.m. on Progressive Voices via TuneIn if you want to catch it, or via podcast afterwards. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.